Why do houses fall out of escrow? It's so frustrating for the seller. You get the house all ready, get all of the photography done, do all of the marketing, all of the open houses, and then you finally find a buyer. You go into contract with the buyer, and it falls out of contract. The buyer walks. The deal never goes through. So frustrating. So I can tell you from experience, the number one reason is due to house inspections. Another reason is because of the loan approval. Third reason is because of the bank appraiser. And the fourth reason is just because of weird things. So stay to the very end because I have a story about something very weird that happened why a buyer walked away from the property. So let's go back to inspections. I also have a story about inspections. We were selling a beautiful house in Auburn. And what happened is we looked at the history of the house and we noticed that it fell out of escrow twice. So we approached the seller and we said, "Well, what happened? Why did it fall out of escrow?" So what it had two inspections, two pest inspectors. They had two buyers that came in. They were in contract, and the pest inspectors came in. They found some remnants of termites. It wasn't an active infestation, it was just remnants. And the pest inspector just gave them a huge estimate on repairing the damage that the termites did, and then also they had to fumigate and stuff like that. I mean, the owner of the property was just so mad at the estimate. You could tell it was just way out of earth here. Like very expensive. So they never ended up closing. Nothing happened for that first buyer. The second buyer came in, they got a different pest inspector to come in, and the same thing happened. They got a huge estimate to repair the work. And of course, the buyer, wants to use whoever they have to do the pest inspection, but they're all licensed the same way. They really have no standard of operation. They resolve the issues, based upon their licensing. So anyway, we came in, we were selling the property, and I noticed, that we better get a really good pest inspector in here. So we did. I did my homework, I did lots of research on them, and we found a pest inspector that we thought would be good. And this was really early on. This was only about the second house that I sold. And the pest inspector did his inspection and he came back with an estimate that was less than half. I mean, it was very reasonable. The seller was happy, the buyer was happy, the inspector did their work, everything turned out great. So that's a warning to people that are putting their houses on the market. Just beware of inspections. Really take a very close look at your house and see what could possibly go wrong and try to make the repairs beforehand. And that's not even a sure way because there's rumors in the real estate industry right now that there's not a lot of closings. We only have like 900, 800 closings every single month. And there's a lot of, you know, people that are vying for the same business. So anyway, the second thing that I was mentioning is the loan approval. So this is very frustrating when this happens. You get almost, you go into contract, you take the house off the market, it's pending on the market and everything, and then lo and behold, you get to the one of the very final stages and you can't clear the loan. So it's a duty of your agent, if you are selling a property, to make sure that the buyer is able to go through all the way to the closing table. I get on the phone with the lender, and for a really long time, I ask the lender hundreds of questions about the buyers. I want to make sure that this never happens to me, it never happens to the seller. And, you know, it's one of the things that you can prevent in the beginning to make sure that that buyer, because when the buyers go out, they can get a letter, a pre-approval letter, a pre-qualification letter. You want to make sure that they're just not a warm body coming into any lender and getting a letter. So that's one thing that you want to make sure. You know, we had an instance whereby I did ask the lender all of these questions, and the lender was taking such a long time. Everything was going so slowly, and I called her on a Sunday morning, and I asked her, what is going on? Are we going to close on Monday? What's the problem here? And apparently, I guess one of the buyers found a different job or something like that, so it caused delays in everything. But what happened in this instance, I don't know how this ever happened, but the buyers got to the closing table and they looked at the loan documents and they found, oh, lo and behold, the mortgage rate changed from 5.75% to 6 something or other. So, but we were so fortunate and so lucky that the buyer decided just to bite the bullet and pay the extra mortgage amount. And, it did go all the way to closing. Sometimes you can't help it, but, you want to make sure that there's nothing going to be in the way of the buyer going all the way to the closing table. Now, another thing that happens is when you do your comparable market analysis, you try to get as much money and, try to market it and get the right price on the property is what you you really think that the property is going to sell. you know and so you put it on the market and you get buyers in to make offers. So the buyers will, if they're getting a loan out, they're going to get what's called a bank appraiser to come in and appraise the property. So if that bank appraiser comes in at a lower appraised amount than what the buyer has put the offer in, the buyer usually has to make up that difference. So what you have to do is kind of negotiate with the buyer, and what are we going to do here? The buyer wants to buy the property, the seller wants to sell the property, and you just have to kind of like negotiate, what would be the best terms to get to the closing table. And that's another reason why houses fall out of escrow, is because at that stage, that point in time, the bank appraiser doesn't agree, and there's ways that you can dispute that amount, but it's really difficult to do that. But that it has been done in the past. Now, this is a strange story that I was going to tell you at the end. Like, buyers can walk anytime away from a property up until they clear the loan. Once the loan is cleared, then it's more difficult for them to walk away. But really, in the whole process, they can pretty much change their minds anytime. So when I started out in real estate, I started with a team lead, and we put a house on the market and everything. And once we were, in the doing our inspections and finding out more about the house, we found out that the roof had an issue with it. So my team lead, who was a real estate agent, went up on the roof and she started to make the repairs herself on the roof. Well, when she was doing that, the buyer actually drove by the property, looked looked at the property, and saw that my team lead, the real estate agent, was making repairs on the roof. Now this is one of the really strange things that can happen is, you know, buyers can walk, and so the buyer decided, he didn't like to see the real estate agent up on the roof like that. So anyway, I hope that you found this helpful. If you have any questions, if there's anything, any stories that you have about why your house fell out of escrow, I'd greatly appreciate it if you can share it in the comments below, or contact me if you have any questions, if I can help you with any of your real estate needs. Thanks very much and have a great day.